We'll start on page 18. If might need a copy back there. You try to hand that back. They have an extra copy.
Not bad. It took me a little bit to settle.
We're in lesson 5 on page 18. We'll try to do sections 3 and 4 today. They're both called section 3. I'm almost sure one of them should be section 4. So we're in a class on how we handle our stuff, God and possessions, and God and money, and this particular lesson we're talking about the issue of greed. So we've got a few visitors with us this morning, so welcome you, and please feel free to share your thoughts as we begin section 3, talking specifically about the idea of greed being idolatry, and then the parable of the rich fool in section 4. We'll try to touch on those two things this morning. So appreciate everybody's presence. Ron, would you mind to start us with a word of prayer?
Almighty God and Father, we're particularly grateful for you, a beautiful morning to bless us with. Thank you for all the people in this room. Hopefully everybody had a prepared mind and all ready to learn more about the manager. Be good stewards of what you bless us with, Father. Realizing everything we have comes from you, and we're so certainly grateful for all the blessings you give us to sustain us. We pray that as we continue to learn through this class, that we continue to realize that all our resources are for you, Father. Everything we give, everything we give back is for your purpose. We pray that we can also use these resources, Father, to be Christians in your sight, Father, to help bring others to you. Thank you so much, most of all, Father, for the grace blessing upon your Son, and giving us that hope in him in this life. So, all those things we ask in Christ's name.
Thank you. Jax, could you go ahead and turn to Ephesians 5 and be ready for 5:3 through 6? And then Jonathan Brinson, if you don't mind, Colossians 3, 5 through 6. And we'll just be ready for those. It's kind of the background we always try to keep in mind through this class. As we talk about any topic, kind of the first two, we said they were foundational, kind of fundamental things for the whole class. It was lesson 1 and 2, and those two things were what? Number 1, it's very easy. It's all God's stuff, right? It's all God's stuff. And number 2, we're just taking care of it. It's all God's stuff. We're just taking care of it. And God's allocator of resources. What should He expect as spiritual return from the stuff that He's blessed us with? So, as we think about those two fundamental, just kind of foundational things, it's all God's stuff. How is He, as stewards of His stuff, how is He getting spiritual return from the things we have? And so this lesson in particular about greed in a very specific way that Paul talks about greed or covetousness and what that means. Jax, can you go first here? Ephesians 5, 3 through 6.
But sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints. Let there be no filthiness, no foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure, or who is covetous, that is, an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience.
And Jonathan, very similar thought, Colossians 3, verse 5 and 6.
Therefore put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry.
So in both of those passages, Paul specifically makes the point, and depending on your version, this may be like put in parentheses that Paul is just mentioning this as a side point, or depending on how it's structured grammatically, but that greed or covetousness is idolatry. Not that it's like idolatry or that it has similarities to idolatry, but that it is idolatry. Greed is idolatry. So, question 1, why is greed idolatry? That's pretty fundamental to what we're doing here. So, help me from your study, from your thoughts, why is greed idolatry?
In relation to God, if you are pursuing something more heavily in God's place.
Yes.
That doesn't have to be technically an item. Greed is a feeling that what it's leading to is more time, more effort, more thought, more desire before desire for God.
Yes.
You replaced it with the urge to make financial gain.
So we talked about last time that almost anything that is good, Satan perverts, right? So it takes this good desire to do more for God and change it into do more for something else. And we see that in a lot of areas. More thoughts on that before I filibuster on you all.
I think it's interesting that this is paired with sexual immorality,
Yes.
which we tend to be very outspoken and dogmatic about, but we kind of normalize this, it seems like.
Yep. Good thought.
The pursuit of success and defining ourselves by our jobs. And, it's just humbling to think about, do we feel the same way about this that we feel about homosexual marriage?
You can be sure that no one who does these things, that's a pretty strong statement. You can be sure that no one who does these things.
Yeah, and I think, I need to look it up again, but I think grammatically in the Greek that is idolatry is actually bracketing the entire
The whole
sin.
thing, yeah.
So greed then is as bad as it's all
It's equated.
It's all equated. But what is idolatry is probably another good question.
Yes.
And anything that supplants God, I don't think that we think that whenever we are being greedy. I don't think we think that we are supplanting God, replacing Him with something. But by its very nature, the desire, the pursuit, the meditation, everything that goes into greed and me trying to get and through any cost the things that I want are all attitudes and actions that should be pointed that God deserves.
Yep.
And we hold those back from Him to use them on our own purposes.
Yeah, we do not think often enough about how that replaces God in our heart, right? So we talked about the definition of greed a little bit. Does anybody remember that definition of greed? I mean, the actual Greek, if you put the words together, it just means holding more. The desire to hold more, the desire to have more, that overwhelming urge to want and have more. So what does that signal about our trust and our contentment in what God has given us? That's the whole point, right? Is that what God has put in front of us is not enough?
I was going to say that this goes back to the very beginning. So when God made man in His image, I think part of that was our ability to be like God and say, when to say enough. So our animal side has these desires that we want more. So whether that's sexual, whether that's eating,
Yeah.
your animals out here, when they want to eat, they go eat. When they mate, they mate. Whatever's on their mind, that's what they do. We have the ability, because God put it in us, to say enough. And I think that's where the greed part gets in, is we need to say enough. And that goes back to Eve in the garden. She didn't know when to say enough. She had everything she needed right there, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah, but very good thought. Other thoughts on greed and idolatry? So just a couple of additional thoughts. Ultimately, idolatry, something's taking the place of God on the throne of our heart. Where's our trust? Where's our contentment? If it's not in God, we've got things.
If you think of the word idol,
Yes.
it's something that's worship.
Yes.
And greed is idolatry because it's what we worship.
Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you went there. That leads me to a couple thoughts. I added these verses for your study. I hope that you had a chance to look at them. But one was 1 Kings 18, which we probably wouldn't think about in this context. But that's Elijah on Mount Carmel. And what is the sin of the people that he is rebuking in a lot of ways in that chapter and in that section of 1 Kings?
They're worshiping false gods.
Idolatry, right? They are in the midst of idolatry. It's interesting to me, if you look up the the God, there's a lot of Baals. Like he says, worshiping the Baals, not just a God, but many gods. But one of the things that God was specifically worshiped for was fertility, productivity, rain, the bringing of prosperity, right? What was, in Elijah's day, what made one wealthy? What did you have that made you wealthy? Crops or animals. What did those things require? They required rain and blessings of fertility. And so the worship of Baal was largely, it was an economic hedge, right? So none of these Israelites would have said, we don't believe in Jehovah. I think they said, Elijah said, right? What's the verse? 1 Kings 18, verse 18. No, 18, verse 21. Somebody read that one? 1 Kings.
And Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you go limping between two different opinions?
Yeah, that's a great phrase. I love that, whatever version it is. How long will you go limping between two opinions? It wasn't like they didn't believe in God, but they had this hedge. Like, I need things to go well economically, and so I'm going to give part of my heart to this other thing that promises economic security. That's pretty, in terms of this class, anyway, I just think that's interesting. And how long will I go limping between two opinions of where my trust and contentment are? That's pretty condemning. How long will I limp between two opinions about what makes me secure and content and feel like I have enough? Anyway, just thought that was an interesting parallel.
I taught in a class in the back last week that we talked about Paul at Ephesus, where, they had all those idols and he came teaching Jesus and, they had to cast their idols out. Well, the silversmiths got upset, and
Yeah.
ready to kill them over it. It's a long topic.
No, not at all, because that idol of Artemis became a different kind of idol for them, right? Like, it was economically important that continue.
I wonder, even though we don't have any physical, we haven't created any statue for us to fall down to. I wonder if we don't create a facade of Yahweh as nothing more than an economical provider.
Yes.
If we don't see him the same way they see, we're hedging our bets. But we do that through the one true God. We're not really worshiping him. We're worshiping this facade that we made of him.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's probably worthy of some thought. Is I'm a worshiper of Jehovah, but just in case, I'm also going to put some trust in this other stuff. Anyway, thought that was worth some thought. And the other verse that I ask you to add, that the author of this material will do better next time and add, is Psalm 115. I said verse 8, but it's really verses 4 through 8. And I think this is also a really interesting, you've probably heard sermons on this idea before, but again, in terms of this specific class and this specific topic, I think it's interesting. Psalm 115, verses 4 through 8. Somebody care to tackle those? Darren, you got them?
Their idols are silver and gold, the work of man's hands. They have mouths, but they cannot speak. They have eyes, but they cannot see. They have ears, but they cannot hear. They have noses, but they cannot smell. They have hands, but they cannot feel. They have feet, but they cannot walk. They cannot make a sound with their throat. Those who make them will become like them. Everyone who trusts them.
We become what we worship. As they began to worship idols, they began to become like their idols. It's a really interesting, it's a little more figurative and like evocative than maybe we would think about. But we become what we worship. So if greed is idolatry and we become what we worship, help me think through that one.
This language reminds me of Ezekiel when he says, you have a heart of stone, I'll give you a heart of flesh. Like, this language of having mouths and not being able to speak and having ears and not being able to hear, like, that's a heart of stone. And so you become less alive spiritually when you're greedy. When you become what you worship, you become dead like the things that you worship. There's no life in those possessions.
100%. The things that materially they devalue over time, they decay, they rust, right? And we become what we worship. We become hard and materialistic, and we devalue ourselves over time. Anyway, again, more to think about there. I think that is a really interesting thing to consider in this context. Anything else there? Yes.
One of the really good pictures of that in the Old Testament is the golden calf, where Israel takes monetary blessing, abundant blessing, and they turn it into an idol. And from that moment, God is going to start speaking to them, saying, "You're obstinate, you're stiff-necked, you're like a calf that's broke out of the stall." They become like what they worship from that standpoint. But where did that come from? But all stems from them being at the foot of the mountain and not knowing this God that has led them out of Israel, and being fearful of them, not having a good understanding of Him, and not to excuse, but just they needed to know God better to preserve that. How do we keep from turning greed into an idolatry? It stems from the very beginning and having a better understanding of who our God is.
Very well said. So the point here, I think, is covetousness is a faith problem. And we don't want to lose sight of that, right? That ultimately it's a battle against unbelief. It's a battle against lack of trust in what God does. It's a battle against ourselves in that way. It's a faith problem. How do you defeat a faith problem? You study, you pray, you meditate, hang around God's people.
Ironically, that's the exact things we're doing if we greed. We're studying, we're meditating, we're focusing on how we get more.
Hanging around people that, watch on TV the people who are good at it. Again, we become what you worship. Question 2 we've probably already touched on, but maybe you have more thoughts. How does greed signal distrust in God?
It's a faith problem, like you said.
It's a faith problem.
Or like Trace says, God's not enough if we, are striving after more possessions to make ourselves feel more secure. Then we're basically saying what God provided is not good enough.
What God put on our table is not good enough. So, kind of comes all the way back to the very first lesson, right? So, do we really believe He owns everything? Do we really believe that He allocates? Yes, ma'am.
No, this is simplistic, but when we first adopted Sophie and we were in China, she was so greedy for food.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what we put in front of her, she would eat and hold it even after we were done. She would hold it in her mouth for later. And when we came home, she was 2. She would sneak things and hide it, no matter what it was. Even the food that she was allergic to, because she would have hives while we were in China. She would eat until she got sick. It was something that she had to unlearn.
Yeah.
So as a new Christian that have, they may be greedy for monetary gain, it's not easy to break. It's something that they will have to unlearn, to trust in God.
Mm.
Sophie had to trust in us that we would provide enough food for her. I mean, even to this day, she doesn't know why, but she will eat so fast and have so much in her mouth, and I'm like, Sophie, that's all your food. You don't have to do that.
Hmm.
And she goes, I don't know why I do this. It's something that it's going to take a while to unlearn. She's been home 10 years, so.
I'm not sure that was simple at all. That was really, really profound. That's excellent. That's the perfect metaphor for this idea. Do you trust enough that the next is coming?
It takes a daily, there's the initial learning of it, but in a case of like deeply rooted trauma like that, that's always probably going to be her go-to. Just if she's not thinking about it, it'll get easier as she's here more and gets older, but that will always be there. And when you think about a new convert, or any of us really, that's so ingrained in our culture that it's always going to be our go-to if we're not intentional to trust in things we see. And so it's a daily discipline, and we need each other. Like Sophie needs Rob and Karen, we need each other to remind us, like, you have what you need to be content today or to be alive today. And so, we're inundated with instant gratification and next day delivery, same day delivery, whatever we want, we can have it. And it takes a daily reminder that I need to be content with what I have. I have enough.
We better be studying. We better be praying. We better be having a spouse that'll call us on it. We better be having friends that'll call us on it.
Just thinking about what Karen was saying. When we picture greed, like anytime you see it in pop culture, it's always something very ugly. Like, a 800-pound guy that's slathered in grease and wants more. Not still wants the fried chicken. It's always pictured as something that's horrific. But a lot of times greed is also something that is very simple and maybe even hidden under a disguise of wisdom. I think of when we, before we had Ryder, Holly saying, maybe we should think about having a child, and I'm going, we can't afford it. We gotta bring. And she'd ask me at one point, she said, don't you think God's going to provide that? Don't you trust God's going to be able to do that? And having a wife, a spouse, a friend, someone to call you out. But I didn't feel like I was being greedy.
Of course not. Of course not.
But the undertone, it's there. That do I trust God enough to say He's going to give me what I need?
Yeah.
I don't have to just gather in and hoard up more and more.
There's a reference that's going to hit about 1% of the people, but nobody. There's not very many Gordon Geckos out there pounding their chest. Greed is good, right? Like I don't think that. See, I missed my but
No, I'm not.
but I don't think our issue is right there pounding our chest saying greed is good. The issue is that somebody has to call us on it, and we don't see it when we have lack of faith, lack of contentment, lack of trust. We got something else on the throne of our heart. We're being idolaters.
Scrooge McDuck is going to be backstroking through the gold coins.
Yeah, you probably hit a larger percentage of the room with
Listen,
Scrooge.
if I get it, everybody.
Okay, let's go down to question 3. Psalm 73. If you were at the event last night, this happens to be my favorite psalm. It was probably my favorite psalm anyway, and then it just got put on anabolic steroids. So Psalm 73, in one viewing, is a psalm about greed. It's a psalm about idolatry, covetousness. So somebody walk me through for some reason Asaph resonates more with me than David. That probably says something about me, but his psalms, I get faster. David's I gotta sit on a little while. Tell me what Asaph is saying here in Psalm 73. Walk me through the intellectual journey he's on here. Where does it start?
It starts at a lie.
Okay.
It starts at something that's not true.
Tara?
Wicked people prosper.
Yeah. So what he sees, or what he thinks he sees, verse 3 maybe says it best, I was envious of the prosperous. I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity. He sees prosperity. He sees, I'm not going to say any different than that. He sees prosperity, and he's envious of that. Now, there's certainly a connection to why are the evil getting this and the righteous aren't. There's a whole other layer of that. But there is just a layer of, I saw prosperity, and I was envious of that.
There's prosperity or perceived ease. Like, their physical life is easy.
They're fat and sleek.
You love to say that. Not about me. But it's, prosperity almost, in my mind even, it's hard to separate prosperity, just that word, from easy life.
I think that's what Asaph is saying here, right? Man, it seems like these people have it easy. I don't have it easy. What's wrong? I'm trying to do the right stuff, but they've got it easy. Okay, where's he get to? I don't want to. We spent believe me, several classes on this particular psalm. But where does he get to? The answer to question 3. What's the opposite of covetousness?
To be near God and for God to be the strength of his heart and portion for him.
I had 2 verses. You nailed one of them. Verse 28. But for me, God's presence is all I need. That's the NET of verse 28. But for me, ESV, it is good to be near God. I have made God my refuge. Verse 25, there is nothing on earth that I desire besides you. So taking that misplaced desire and redirecting it, again, that's a daily, difficult unlearning. How do we reposition that desire? As for me, God's presence is all I need. There's nothing on earth I desire besides you. Anyway, I just think those verses describe the opposite of covetousness.
And I think to get to that, I think verses 16 and 17 are the key.
No question.
Which is why assembly, being together, worshiping God, we are reminded
Yes.
how it is in the present.
Yes.
That's not the end.
Absolutely.
This is what gives us, this is what rekindles our hope. It gives us the motivation to endure the sufferings of the flesh, persecutions, whatever, the envy. It helps us to put their prosperity in perspective.
Yeah, I think that's so well said.
Being in the sanctuary.
Being in the sanctuary. Verse 17, that is the turning point. Like literally, that's the fulcrum of the whole psalm until I went into the sanctuary and I observed their end. When you get to life's ultimate crisis points, what did my idol do for me? When you get to somebody dying in front of you, when you get to your own face to face with your own mortality, life's ultimate crisis points, where's your trust and what did it do for you? I think that's where Asaph got to. Helps us redefine where our worship should be.
So how do we keep one another accountable when we see this?
How do we keep one another accountable?
Because we don't talk about politics, don't talk about finances, right? And so when you love somebody and you see, and we're all guilty of this attitude. I mean,
100%.
especially when you're in a place where you are Asaph and you see, it's easy to sit and talk about what we should do and the right attitude to have. But when you're in a place and you see, this person I'm close to is in sin, but their life seems easy. I'm trying to do the right thing and my life seems difficult. Or we see somebody we love with that mindset. How do we reach out to one another and how can we talk to one another about these things in a gentle and loving way?
Yeah, Dad, how do we do that?
That's a hard question.
Get me down to meditate.
Yeah. I'm sure we'd all come to some version of the answer. There's not, I don't think there's a simple answer. But you better know them, and you better love them. And they better have a relationship with you where you're going to be able to tackle really difficult things without thinking there's ulterior motive. They better know your love's genuine.
One thing that we can do to help that is one, I think we start working on that before we run into the problem. We start working with that before we are trying to, if we're going, okay, I see somebody that's struggling with this and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna try to address it now, we're probably just a little bit late in trying to work on that. But one thing that we can do is commit today that I'm gonna put truth into the world. I'm not gonna allow falsehoods to continue to grow. So if I'm always talking about the latter end of this song, as opposed to the front end, if I'm always talking about the end and how it is better to be with God and all the prosperity that we perceive in the world is just that, it's a perception. It's false. None of those things at the beginning of that are true. They're not plagued, they're not plagued like mankind. Yes, they are. They're not in trouble like other men. Yes, they are. They don't have any pain in their death. Yes, they do. Every bit of that is false. And even the prosperity at the end, they're bankrupt. So if I would start committing myself to put truth into the world with everything that I speak, it would help in those situations when I run into somebody who's struggling with this. To already, they see you coming and they go,
I know what he's gonna say.
there you go. I know exactly what they're going to say. And they're, hopefully they're going to understand it's probably right.
I think what Kyle's saying in a nutshell is you teach it, right? But I also believe the power of example, is something that reaches people.
No question.
So living it in our lives, really contemplating what we let others see, the images that we portray to others, or put on Facebook. Being a good example, I think, can weigh heavily on people.
Agreed, Holly.
I think we have to make sure we take the plank out of our own eye before we start looking at this thing.
For sure. Which is really hard.
Now, how do we find a person who, are we willing to be uncomfortable enough to find a person to say, hey, when you see this in me, please tell me, because I want, and then be receptive when we're held accountable. I wonder if our greatest idol isn't possessions, but comfort. Am I willing to be uncomfortable enough to share my struggles so people know that, I don't trust in my possessions, I still struggle. And am I willing to see that in my own life and be accountable? And am I willing to love somebody enough to speak to them, to give up my comfort, to speak to them and say, listen, I love you, this is important. This is as if you were committing adultery. It's equated with that, not say those words, but I think comfort may be our greatest idol.
Yeah, it's just how much money have we sacrificed to the God of comfort?
They're definitely related. Yeah, all really good thoughts. Don't have anything to add. Roger.
To go with what both of them said in terms of example, how the world sees, we need to let them see, how do we handle the very same problem that they have? They should be able to see that we handle them a different way. There's nothing more powerful than example. Without saying a word, you can show. You can be negative in your comments, you can be negative in your behavior, you can talk about how bad. But for example, show them how we handle it.
Yes.
That will draw them to come to us and say, how on earth do you do that?
Which means that we got to be willing to say that we're having the issue, right? We got to be willing to. It's got to be somewhat not. Anyway, being transparent about that, and how do you?
We can speak to them about
the
sanctuary. We've considered the matter and that's our motivation.
Really good stuff. Let's go one page over. Talk just for a minute at least about the parable of the rich fool in Luke chapter 12. For the sake of time, we've only got about 10 more minutes. We won't read all of that parable, but I hope you've had a chance to review it. I think somewhat familiar probably to us about tearing down our barns and building greater. and let's just dive into the questions. We'll get into the details of the parable, I believe, as we do. How would the world describe our main character?
Successful entrepreneur.
A successful entrepreneur. That's a really good answer. I think that's how the world would describe him. An ambitious success. And they might even say, he's really planning for the future. He is putting up more facilities to plan for the future. He's an ambitious success.
I'd say he's left a great legacy.
He's left really good. He's left a great legacy for his family. Yes, look what he has left for those coming after him.
That was
Yeah. There's honesty. Yeah. So how does that supply the plot twist that Jesus gives us in this parable?
God calls him a fool.
So this ambitious, successful, thoughtful, planning for the future entrepreneur is a fool. He is not an ambitious success. He's a distracted failure. He's not planning for the future. He's completely unprepared for the future. His legacy is thoroughly misplaced. So what? Let's move on. We'll circle back to some of these thoughts, I'm sure. So I'm sure you noted the pronouns in verses 17 and 18. What will I do? I have nowhere to store my crops. This I will do. I will tear down my barns. I will build larger ones. I will store all my grain and my goods. What's his view of stewardship?
Ownership.
It is his stuff. It is very, very clear that these are his things.
And it's up to him.
And it's up to
It's
him.
up to him to take care of it. No one else can do it. It's up to him.
That's a good thought too.
And also, he knows best, even better than God.
100%. His stuff to do with as he wants,
And he has the right to do what
and he's got the right to do. So I just had the distraction of greed begins when we forget whose things we have. It's probably where this started. He forgot whose things he had and for whose benefit they were to be used. It's all God's. That simple viewpoint may have changed this whole story from his view of stewardship. We talked about Matthew 13, the parable of the sower, the deceitfulness of riches, the cares of the world. What ultimately does Jesus say those things do? Separate us?
Choke out the word.
Asphyxiate the word. Isn't it? Like, that's how did the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches, what was the ultimate end for our ambitious, successful entrepreneur in the parable here? They asphyxiated the word. They choked off the word from understanding whose things these were and for whose benefit they were. Get distracted. Anyway, that is. I think this is so much in line with what we've been talking about in the last couple of classes. Other thoughts on that?
It's obvious 17 and 18 is the crux of the parable. That's where we see the issue with the guy. How do you rewrite that to change the outcome?
Good question.
What's the different? Same pronouns might still be in there. Some of them, not all of them. I think mine needs to come out.
Yeah.
But we're stewards of it. It requires we are going to do something with it. God made it very clear when He gave it.
So let's play. I love it. Let's play the game. And he thought to himself, I'm okay with that so far. You can think to yourself, right? We're good there. What shall I do? What shall I do with God's stuff?
Yeah, I think it's a good start.
What shall I do with God's stuff? And how can it be to His glory? Would be a different sentence. And I don't know how the next sentence goes, like what that means, but doesn't that change the rest of it? I didn't know where you're going there, but that's that.
I think it is. There's a quote that's been
bouncing around on social media feed. I don't have a clue who it's from, exactly how it goes, but it's something along the lines of, why is it that when our prosperity rises, we're quick to build fences, not tables? And I think that's kind of the idea here. He's getting more and more. What's he doing? He's building things to protect it. He's not building things to use it. He's not building a bigger table to have more people come enjoy the prosperity. He's building something to store up more and more.
Could have produced, or, could have built one for four, you know?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know what the second, like verse 18, I don't know how verse 18 would have changed. This will I do. If he would have had the mindset, what's the best spiritual return on God's stuff here? I don't know what verse 18 is, but I bet it would have been different.
Well, it's interesting because it's juxtaposed to the like the parable of the talents, right? Because what are the guys with the talents doing? I mean, they're taking what was their master's and being good about getting the master more stuff.
Yes.
Right? So like this whole idea of like, let's change this sentence to be good. It's like that's something that the people with the talents, they did, right? Their goal was not, I'm going to make more for me. It's, I'm going to do what I can with what I am stewarding now to make the master a return.
Yes.
And so I think us talking about, you know, we got to change this sentence. It's like, yeah, we need to be more like the people with, if he was more like the people with the talents,
Yes.
right, that would have been, I don't think he would have been called fool.
Thoroughly agree. And as we talked a little bit about the talents, parable of talents a couple of classes ago. What kind of return do we think the master desires? And that, if we think through that question, I think it helps us answer the other question.
And what was being taught by the Jews at this time is this: God blesses those who are following Him.
Yeah, that's the metric, right?
If you're following God, then God's going to bless you. And so what He's trying to show the Jews here is that just because you have blessings doesn't mean that you're following God. And then the opposite for them was true was, okay, well, if this guy is falling on our times, he must have done something bad. Right? And Jesus is trying to make sure and teach them that that is not the way the world works.
Yes.
I think it's easy for us all to get into this mindset that, all right, I have $1,000, but you know, if I have 10,000, I can do a whole lot more. What if I had 1 million? And we're always in this mode of, but I could do more good if I had more.
Yes.
So we're constantly amassing. As Kyle said, we don't think in terms of how can I use it today.
Yes.
Well, wait, but if I get a little bit more,
So there's, completely agree. I've heard it described this way in some settings where people had more of a tithe 10% mindset. Said, man, if I just made $1 million, imagine how big that 10% would be, right? If I had 10 million, imagine how big that 10% would be. It's a very dangerous.
And this is also going to have some backdrop of Jewish law, Hebrew law in it as well. If you think about, you know, when our fields are full, it's still not all ours. When we leave the gleaning, we leave the opportunity for the poor. This guy has literally had his barn is full. Like God has filled him up. And his go-to with that is, I wonder how much more he'd give me if I had a bigger barn.
Yeah.
I wonder, let's see how, but there's got to be an aspect somewhere of this, even just under Jewish law, not even thinking of a Christ mindset. There's some of this that belongs even to the community. There's some of this that belongs to the needy around me, and none of that is in his view.
So I'd point to the last verse of the parable, right? It's been said many times, is not rich toward God. There's a poverty toward God, to your point, of understanding what spiritual return should God be seeing from the way that I've been blessed. I'm going to answer question 3 really quickly because we're almost out of time. The relationship between covetousness and contentment, if you noted in Hebrews 13 there, they just don't coexist. Covetousness and contentment just don't coexist. The opposite of covetousness is contentment in God.
Inverse, as contentment decreases, covetousness can increase, and vice versa.
Yes, the yin and yang almost, right? As one grows, you can see the other decrease. As our contentment in God grows, again, that relearning that Karen talked about.
You know, Michael, both of them are a choice.
Yes.
We can choose to be covered.
Both a choice. Yeah. And question 4, just for your thoughts, what do you take from this parable? and new construction should be in quotes here, as you go into a new construction project in your life, what consideration should go into that? Whose resources am I investing? Is there spiritual return? What causes poverty towards God? All good thoughts. Thanks everybody for all your thoughts on that. We'll begin lesson 6 on Wednesday.